This segment is on thermal processing seasoned meat to be cooked, dried, and shelf stable. We will be using a cooker smoker such as this, a dehydrator, and a home oven to make whole muscle jerky, ground and form jerky, and snack sticks without casings. Our heat treatment will be utilizing the current food-safe processes for making shelf-stable products, where we will be heating the meat to 160 degrees internally prior to drying. The object of this cook step is to destroy any harmful pathogens such as Salmonella or E. coli before they become heat resistant. In the past, a low drying temperature has been utilized to evaporate moisture to allow meat to be stored unrefrigerated. These low temperature drying processes have been shown to allow potential harmful pathogens to become heat resistant. Contamination from these types of bacteria is much more likely when using wild game meat.
Accidentally getting fecal matter on meat when field dressing game is more common than one would think. Fecal matter has been known to contain pathogens such as E. coli. Your wound locations, transporting and hanging game and ambient temperatures are also problems associated with the contamination and uncontrolled bacterial growth. This is why it's necessary to be meticulous about handling, trimming, and cleaning game meat.
To meet this high internal temperature and to assure that bacterial lethality has been accomplished prior to drying the meat, we will be using a steam heat method in this particular smoker, where we're going to be putting a water pan directly over the burner to create the steam. We're also going to be using a rapid dry roast procedure in a home oven, where we'll just turn up the oven to 325 degrees initially to drive up that internal temperature. After the internal temp process, though, we're going to immediately transition to a low drying process. This means that we want our temperatures down low to be able to dry the product over a longer period of time. This two-step method in principle is used by commercial producers such as us of making shelf-stable dried meat snacks today. It is now widely supported by the USDA for making venison, jerky, snack sticks at home with a margin of safety. We will show that you can make excellent jerky using this cook, dry, thermal processing procedure. Now we're ready to lay out some of our meat on trays to be heat treated in a cooker smoker and save the rest for heat processing in our home oven and in our home dehydrator.
The objective in preparing meat to be cooked and dried is to assure that the pieces are not touching each other or laying over each other, and that the meat is unfolded. It may be obvious, but those areas will not get smoked and it will appear raw and be undercooked.
We'll go ahead and just finish laying these now, and we'll be outside heat processing this jerky. After loading these trays, we will insert a temperature probe to verify the internal temperature. When the meat has reached the internal temperature of 160 degrees Fahrenheit, we'll accept all the pieces as reaching the same internal temperature. Since the meat was cut into 1/4 inch and 1/2 inch thicknesses, a temperature probe can be inserted between two slices like this, or it can be inserted directly into a thick piece like this. Either method will work for this purpose here. This type of thermometer and probe right here works well for the cook step, since we don't need to open the door and release steam to insert and read a thermometer.
On this type of cooker smoker, we have a water pan placed directly over the burner, which will create steam very rapidly. Your equipment may be different, but the objective is to generate either steam or to be able to roast meat strips rapidly to achieve 160 degrees internal temperature. It's best if this can be done in less than 20 minutes. We have preheated our cooker to generate steam so that when the meat is put in, we can immediately start driving up the internal temperature. We're going to closely monitor the temperature during this step. The meat should not be cooked any longer than necessary for product quality reasons. $160.
The desired IT has been achieved, so we will remove the probe and immediately reset the oven temp to low, or about 140 to 145 degrees Fahrenheit, and begin drying the meat. We've unloaded the water tray now, and we've put in our wood chips, and we've got a rolling smoke started here. There are several different styles of smoke producers and types of wood to generate smoke, but the idea is to apply smoke to a tacky, moist surface for good smoke adhesion. A moist, tacky surface will develop early in a dry cycle. As moisture begins to evaporate, we will apply smoke to the meat during that time. After the smoke is applied, feel the meat surface to see if it's somewhat crunchy and dry. We're not exactly there at this stage here because we're not done smoking, but additional moisture may be necessary to slow down surface drying, so the internal meat moisture can continue making its way through the surface to evaporate. Another way of adding moisture is adjusting dampers or vents on the smoker to contain some of the evaporative moisture. But too much moisture can accumulate in a cabinet like this and cause back condensation, which can blacken or create a muddy surface or a muddy look and provide an undesirable taste.
Our smoke process is mostly complete and we see cooked meat color developing. An important consideration in the drying process is to observe that the color development of the meat is uniform. Hot and cold spots is a problem in most cooker smokers, especially with no powered air circulation. If one tray shows more of a cook color than the other, then the tray should be rotated top to bottom or front to back. This will likely have to be done at least once or twice an hour.
It's important to be able to maintain steady levels of heat in the cooker once a process is started. If your cooker cabinet is not insulated, and the cooking temperatures may be difficult to sustain on very cold, windy days. Oven temperature adjustments may have to be made to compensate for this heat loss. Some time has passed now, and we have been monitoring the process and feel that we can start checking the jerky for doneness. Two of the initial indicators that we look at is the overall cook color of the meat. With cure, this should be a light to dark mahogany. The second is if it's accompanied by shrinkage. We should be able to see shrinkage when we look at this visually. From start to finish, jerky can lose 50% to 60% of its initial weight, so it is not surprising that the physical size will change. We can pick some pieces here at random and flex them to see how elastic they are. If they are rubbery and difficult to split open, then likely the dry process should continue. However, when pieces can be twisted and pulled apart, then visually check and see and feel the inside. As we expected, we see connective tissues and red meat fibers. The connective tissue is stretchy and clear early in the drying process, but stringy and white when properly dried, like you see with this piece. By looking and feeling the red meat fibers, they should be slightly moist but not wet. Normally, one indicator will not occur without the other one being close behind. When a combination of these indicators occurs, sample a few pieces to get an idea of the bite and texture. This serves as a guide to determine whether to continue or to stop the drying process.
Ground and formed meat, whether jerky or casingless snack sticks, has quite a different texture since the ground meat was mixed to pull protein to bind it back together. Depending on how much protein was pulled, the meat can be elastic even when properly dried. However, if the protein matrix breaks down due to over-drying, the meat snack will become crumbly and mealy. The more that you make dried meat snacks, the more these indicators will become comfortable flags to you when you pull your jerky or snack sticks out of the drying process.
The value of the initial cook step is that it destroyed the potentially bad bacteria, and all we're looking for now is the proper dryness and texture of our meat snack. When determining doneness, uniform thickness is very helpful and saves us time. We've come to my house and we are going to do this process with our thermal process in a home oven. And I've already mixed in our spice, and what you can do to accomplish the smoke flavor in your jerky in a home oven is to apply some powdered smoke. High Country has 4 flavors of this. We've got apple and hickory and mesquite and cherry wood, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some mesquite to our jerky here. So this is fairly simple at this stage. When after you've mixed in your spices, just simply put this with your meat and just stir it in. This makes a nice coating. This is whole muscle jerky that we're going to do here to illustrate how we're going to cook this. So, and I can just take this right directly to the cookie sheet. The spice that I had in here has already had the cure put into it, and actually I refrigerated this overnight prior to bringing it out here. So we are actually already cured through the meat. So all we're doing is just adding some liquids or some powdered smoke here. So. And we'll just use these cookie sheets here, and we'll just lay these out. And this will take a little while, and I'll keep on doing this, and we'll come back to the process. We've got the jerky laid out in the pans now, and we're ready to do our cook step. If you recall, in our smoker cooker process here, we are utilizing a 2-step method for making jerky. Again, this is to drive the internal temperature up to 160 degrees and then do our dry process. And the reason that we're cooking it up to 160 degrees is we're trying to do a lethality towards any harmful pathogens that may exist, especially when we're doing wild game. This is particularly true. So what I'm going to do is we're going to do a fast roast of this jerky. I'm going to put it in the oven. I've already preheated the oven, which is important to do. Don't just put it in there and turn it up to 325. We don't want to spend any more time than necessary at that high of a temperature. So everything's preheated. We're going to use an internal temperature probe, and I'm just going to plug it into this little readout here. In a stick like this, all we needed to do was we just needed to insert it. But if you have flat style jerky, or if you're making casingless snack sticks, or if you're making ground and formed jerky, the easy way to do that is just flop over a piece on the end of your probe, and that'll do exactly the same thing. Some of these probes like this cannot withstand this kind of a temperature, so you'll need an oven-proof probe if you're using one like this. So we're going to go ahead and load this to the oven and start our process here. This should take a very short period of time. This should only be about maybe 15 minutes to achieve this internal temperature. That's why I call it a fast roast. And 325 is about the temperature that we'll need to drive it up internally rapidly. We don't want to spend a lot of time at this temperature. As soon as it hits 160 degrees internal, we want to open this door and get all that heat out of there and turn it down to its lowest temperature in the oven. Ovens like this have a high concentration of heat just by virtue of how it's designed, so it's much more intense than it would probably even be in a regular store-bought little smoker. We've reached our 160 degree internal temperature, and we've done that in 11 minutes, so that was a very fast procedure. What we're going to do now is we're going to open up this door, and we're going to get the heat out of this oven so that we can go into the dry cycle. And we're going to get this oven set as low as possible. So we're going to come up here and we're going to reset our oven. Now just to explain something here, this oven here won't go below 170 degrees. Your oven may go down to 130, 140 degrees, which would be ideal. So what we're going to have to do here is we're going to set this at its lowest temperature here. Because we are running at such a high oven temperature, 170 degrees, I'm going to add water because I don't want the jerky to get too crusty and brittle. So I'm going to put a tray in here, right at the bottom here. During the dry cycle here. I'm also going to, don't forget to remove your probe. And what we'll be doing will be exactly the same as we did in the cooker smoker segment. And just to mention, we could also prop this door open a little bit because I am at these high temperatures. One thing to remember with both propping this open and putting the water tray in, these are optional procedures. This isn't highly necessary, but I'm doing it just as a precaution because I want to do the best job I can on this jerky. Now this is another method of making your jerky at home, and it's with a typical home dehydrator. And this is one of the best ways of actually making jerky because you have such good control over a very slow moisture evaporation, and it doesn't create a brittle jerky. It controls the environment within the dehydrator. So as far as making jerky at home, this is probably one of the best methods. But the only problem with it is that these home dehydrators, a lot of the older styles and maybe some of the newer styles, cannot achieve high initial cook temperatures. And again, when we're talking about making wild game jerky, we want to include that step. But it's a fairly easy step to accomplish because again, all we need to do is drive the temperature up initially to 160 degrees. Now we can do that as we've shown in the oven procedure by putting in the jerky into the oven and setting it at 325 degrees and running the internal up to 160 degrees. That only took about 10-12 minutes for us to accomplish that. And so once that's accomplished, we're ready to go right into a dehydrator like this. And that's primarily what we're going to do here is we're going to take and just transfer it in here. What should be mentioned here is that even with ground informed, when that temperature drives up to 160 degrees, the protein is set and you can actually lift ground informed jerky without any problem into these trays. We've got stick jerky, so we'll just go ahead and transfer pieces into the dehydrator. Get me a tongs here. And some of these you might want to trim to fit if necessary. But this is an excellent method. We've already, as you can see, we've already ran through the cook step, and what we're going to do is just finish this off. The dry step, we're going to use this dehydrator. Now this will be in dehydrators, and we would be checking from time to time, probably once every hour or half hour. We'll want to check the trays to make sure that we're uniformly drying this jerky out, which we're going to be able to tell by the color development in these layers, and we may have to take the bottom one and put it to the top to accomplish that, which is just a small task that needs to be considered. Again, when we're checking for doneness, no difference with what we're going to be looking for. We're going to have shrinkage in here. We're going to have color changes. All of those are flags to tell us that we need to begin to check for the dryness that we prefer in the jerky. And all of this has been covered in the cooker smoker process. Use food-safe handling practices at all times when removing and packaging cooked and dried meat snacks. After proper heat treatment, the product is bacterially sterile. It is important to handle your finished jerky with care to avoid cross-contamination for that reason. Thoroughly wash and dry your hands, especially if working with raw meat or any kind prior to handling meat snacks that may be stored without refrigeration.
Try this method prior to packaging to improve palatability in dried meat snacks. Tightly seal all the product in 1 or 2 plastic bags and store them overnight at room temperature. By osmosis, the residual moisture will equalize amongst all the pieces and create a more palatable jerky. Equalizing, however, will not reconstitute jerky that is burned or over-dried, but it will improve it somewhat.
Meat snacks can be stored on a refrigerator for 1 or 2 months in containers like this or bags like this here. However, jerky can still salt out or mold if it has a high moisture content or water activity. This can happen with home thermal processed jerky or snack sticks. These potential problems can be caused by hot and cold spots in the cooker smoker, differences in thicknesses, cooking and drying different types of products in the same load, or also pulling the jerky from the drying process too soon.
Leaving a lid or a bag partially open to release moisture is helpful to avoid mold, but can also increase salt out as free moisture pulls salt along with it to the surface. Remember, jerky can be stored frozen for long-term storage with minimal flavor loss.